So it's been wondered if there's a universal language, what would it possibly be? Some people might think that music could be an amazing contender, and certainly we could think of that. Like everything works with vibration. Some people think that English is a universal language because you go to many parts of the world and most people can speak it somehow, even in small ways. Um, what if light is a universal language? Because wherever you go in the world, more or less, people would see the same spectrum of colors, you know? So we could look at this as a possible language too. That nature is speaking to us through the spectrum of light, and we can somehow speak back to nature too, based on what light is sending forth that the body is receiving. So I grabbed this crystal from the shelf. It's pretty interesting that the first person who really placed an intention into the dimensions of light also founded three-dimensional physics. So much of our thinking process were influenced by Newton. What does it really mean then, though, to look at these colors? There's so much interest now in getting to understand the chakra systems. And definitely let's look at that. What is the key of 7 that seems to be mapped out just as much like in the human body? I need to go through all these pens. I used to do this so often, and it's actually quite fun to go back to the mapping of what could be the body, mind, and the spirit. So what I love about the key of 7 is that you go to different parts of the world and there might be all sorts of interpretations to what could be the root, the womb, the solar plexus, the heart, the throat, the third eye, and the crown. Let me adjust this so that maybe you can see the whole thing. Alright, maybe that's good. When you look at the key of 7 within the chakras that might align somehow with the 7 colors in the rainbow, the 7 notes in the musical scale, 7 days of the week, a lot of people take for granted that the chakras are supposedly a South Asian tradition, something that came out thousands or hundreds of years ago. The key of 7, in fact, is quite recent. It was not an Indian or a Hindu or a Tantric Buddhist that gave us the 7 chakras as a formal framework. It was in fact a theosophist thinker named Leadbetter that um, made this common, published this in a way that makes us look at dimensionalities within the 7, which in prior times would have been different numbers. It could have been 5, it could have been 30, it could have been 21, it could have been 12. Um, so everywhere I go around the world, there are so many different understandings of the colors. Um, but it may be conventional enough that there are basic agreements to what the colors might be speaking when people see them in the process, in the inner dance. Um, there are enough patterns to perceive that we might be speaking the same language. And when I write these down, I'm not saying that this is it. I'm bringing some things to visibility only in the sense that they could be talked about. We could look at these and regard what would be a vibrational system of interpretation that might have these corresponding to vibrations, to tonalities, to textures in a synesthetic sense. So we can look at these probably in the long term. I had been aware of this even before I experienced my first inner dance process. I came into contact with the seed of life, and the moment I did, there was an actual earthquake that happened. So people were running around, and I knew somehow this is important. So when I was living in the beach, I had inscribed this in the ground. I created a garden that initially was configured exactly in this way with a key of 7 in the middle, and later I created 12 petals around these 7 circles to signify the flower of life. You can talk about that later on. What is this? Like, what does this mean? One possible contribution this brings to us is an awareness of the shift from here to here. How is that different? When you look at it from a hierarchical, vertical way, a lot of people consider that the highest chakra is the crown. When you look at this from the vantage of the color wheel, there seems to be a circularity there. The way you construct an orange is, in the color sense, to combine yellow and red. You combine 2 primary colors in order to create a secondary color. To construct green, you need to mix blue and yellow together. And to construct indigo, you actually need to borrow something from below it and something way, 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 way below it. So there has to be some kind of circular nature so that indigo can be seen in relationality with the other colors. And then where would violet then be? Now, to construct violet, you need to mix 2 or 3 colors. What do I mean by 2? And it's actually hard to say 2 or 3. Indigo is the combination of is a secondary color that combines two primaries, which is blue and red. Now, violet is the combination of indigo and white, which means it's a combination of two primary colors, and white white being a combination of all the colors. So therefore, when you look at it from um, a circle, you can construct indigo by combining red and blue when you allow all these to come into a circularity. Violet then could be seen as being the circle in the middle, which signifies the completion or even the point of origin from which all the colors can emerge as a rainbow. So that could already give us an idea of possible relationships between the secondary colors, for example, being indigo, orange, and green, which would be the third eye, the womb, and the heart, and the primary colors, which should be the root, um, expression, and um, power structures, like the solar plexus. There could also be relationships between the two primary colors that combine into a secondary color. Um, this is a simplification of what psychology and anthropology and language processes could reveal if we looked at all of the um, all of things human, all things deeply human that actually could be held in a color-based way. Do we have dimensions, and where would we begin? There's so many possible expressions of dimensionality in the philosophies and the psychologies and the axiologies. Um, so, in fact, we might perceive these as different stages of human thought, different aspects, qualities, different dimensionalities of not just the human experience, but the earth as an experience, because colors do hold some kind of universality anyway in how we perceive it, until maybe such time that we are able to perceive the world, the world's image beyond the infrared and the ultraviolet. Um, we might have to stay with this for a while. We might have to stay with the key of 7 prior to expanding into the key of 12 and the key of 13 once this expands to the outer petals of sacred geometry. So, how I like to perceive this when I'm working with people in the inner dance space is to um, perceive the story of who we are. If I was to move some of these representations to here, you can place I am here. Um, and there are many other words that we can place here that serve as different representations of our energy fields. Um, but for now, let me just be free to casually place possible universals. I shifted I see to I know here for certain reasons. Um, let's say share instead of speak. All right. So when people go into the process, there could be portals, there could be intentions, there could be doorways for one to enter the map. Certain people approach the inner dance through a sense of agency or action. It's an activity, it's a spiritual modality, it's something you do. Some people approach it out of a pure healing or transformative process. It's not so power oriented, it's more of an expression of the heart. Some people enter the process with interest in communication, to kind of arrive into a kind of communion or deeper understanding between self and other. Um, some people might approach inner dance as a resource, a way of um, accessing inner wealth, a way of manifesting sufficiency or abundance. Certain people might approach inner dance as a creative or um, constructive exercise, a way to access our creative life force, that we don't stagnate into victimhood. We become spiritual artists that are able to paint our own lives. Um, the portal could also be self knowledge. It could be approaching um, our wisdom centers, to go into a knowing of oneself and maybe a way of understanding the world around us. And the middle could be the spiritual portal, the understanding of ourselves as energy beings, as spirit organisms that are really just quite deep and um, almost unknowable. So, looking at these key statements, like I am, I know, I share, I love, I evolve, I create, I have, they are coordinated with each other so that when people open up themselves into the energy field, sometimes a particular color might awaken randomly, and sometimes it might move to another color. Um, Very often, when you open up a secondary color, there would be a contrast or complement, so that when you work in the womb space, for example, there would be a lot of openings being worked on in the throat chakra. When you work on the root issues, the opposite of that is green. So people start accessing heart space, because you can only really work on your root, your sustainability, unless you open the heart. It would be the same thing with the indigo and the yellow. That when people go into power processes, very often, if that was the opening, um, knowledge systems kind of become recessive and less accessible. So in a way, there's a need to focus on the third eye, or the ability to understand and to see from a more vast awareness, so that this begins to direct this rather than this very often directs that. And the violet coordinates all of that. Um, and an endocrine gland system, the pituitary gland, helps to manage the pineal gland, the thyroid, the thymus, the adrenals, the reproductive glands, and the gonads, so that everything is cohesive with each other. If you close a certain dimensions, the others might close. You close someone's voice, you might close someone's emotions, you might get stuck in the body even as you lose your sense of efficacy or abilities to become a change agent in the world. And then the heart closes, the mind isn't able to access its own um, wisdom. And this, of course, would not be so easy to go into. So, in many ways, the highest chakra uh, is is here, but from a middle place, it's not so much the highest. It could be the starting point. So let's pretend that the violet could also be the heart. The heart is the middle. The heart is the core, the crux, the the essence. Um, when the inner dance focuses initially here, um, the questions that normally might come up within the violet has to do with deep questions related to existence, you might call existence like a being. The philosophical tradition that focuses on being is ontology. Ontology describes uh, all your sense of being. You know, if you have an ontology of self, then there is an existential self. Everything that has a being in your mind, in your awareness, in your life, has an ontology. So to understand the I am as the starting point, energetically and psychically, physiologically, it's very hard for people to access knowing without first reaching an ontological dimension. Um, Persons who have been dealing with existential issues, who might not have been seen and understood or supported um, as an I, as an I am, would not often be able to go effectively or holistically into love, expression, action, creation, or a space of having because of the sense of lack held within the primary state. So, in a way, the first illusion that could arrive into the mind of a baby that had just come to earth would be I am not. And maybe the first illusion is the illusion of separation. Having have just come from unity, suddenly nothing is connected, everything is separate. Um, and starting from there, everything else might follow. Like I am not leads to I don't know, I don't understand, I can't speak my truth, or no one supports me, I don't belong, or I can't do it, I'm too weak, or I'm stagnant, I don't have freedom, I'm not creating my own reality. And in the red, it could be I am poor, I am insufficient, I don't have internal or external resources to bring me to my highest potential. So maybe as a starting ground, the simplest way of understanding the mandala is to look at the journey from ontology to an epistemology. Epistemology talks about knowledge as a structure. Like, how do you construct a mind? How is a consciousness scaffolded and then built from the ground up? And unless this becomes the seed of life that later on brings about the flowering and the tree and the forest of experience, um, it's very difficult to create a forest without a seed. So, in the mandala of things, you know, the mandala of the energy flow, um, w- there must be some kind of understanding as to how we have arrived at the reality that just feels so real and feels so dense and difficult to bring transformation um, onto. All of these might have philosophical or scientific dimensions. I mentioned, for example, ontology and epistemology here. There could be logic systems, or there could be phenomenological systems, or there could be axiology systems, there could be hermeneutic systems, there could be rhetoric systems, there could be um, there could be just anything you might look at in the east and in the west, the north and the south, are actually mapped out in space. What in time looks more like an energy wave that um, follows a sequence of events. Um, like, is it possible to experience life without story or narrative? So this is the element or the aspect of our awareness that needs this in order to have someone get to know him or herself. A story needs like a beginning, and it needs an ending. And to make it a story, once you have these, you need to have a big middle space. When you go into the inner dance, there still is a story, but the more you understand the story, you realize that there's a story of stories. So each of these is a story, but the story isn't being told within time, it's being told within space. And what space does is it allows different points to be seen outside of time in a synchronic simultaneity. Um, in time, these colors may as well be there, whether it be seen as brain state activities or energy management principles like conservation, conversation, consumption, competition. Um, Religion usually serves truth, not in time but in space. Um, Religious truths are very resistant to change over history. It tries to reflect on what are the first principles, what are the universal truths that will be there, um, unchanging. Unlike, say, when you look at science, science allows for self correction, it allows for an evolution. If you have spent time with the indigenous people, everything takes place through story. Story that then leads to myth, mythology that then might lead to religion, a religion that might then lead to rationality, rationality that may then lead to science, and for one reason or another, there seems to be a reversal where the mind is starting to shift back to archaic and original states. So the wave, in many ways, is in a conversation with the mandala. Going back to our quantum physics, there's this relationship between the wave and the particle. Um, the particle could be any aspect of the wave, and were you to look at the wave, to bring it into observation, the wave would collapse into a particle. They are the same, but were you to probably look at the nature of the particle, what you might see are waves within them. That's what quantum physics has um, ended up in. The monad, or the smallest particle, is the superstring, which is a wave that cuts across dimensions. And if we were to understand these as dimensions, maybe these are actually the waves. And instead of seeing one particle at a time, each chakra system is a dimensionality of time within space and space within time. Um, Later, we get interested in the fact that each color actually holds a rainbow. Within the yellow is the key of seven. The green also has a rainbow within it, and each color within that rainbow would still hold a fractal mirror of what is inside, what is outside, what is held in the big is actually also in the small somehow. So, what if this is what we in fact look like? Um, there's a lot more to this that we could uncover that helps us to go through the entire evolution of consciousness that could be seen from an eastern or western, a northern or southern um, big picture. For the meantime, I think it's just really important that we um, go into the process of um, coming into agreement as to what is the universal language, what do we look like, and because there's so many complexities, where does it all converge? You can look at so many cultural interpretations, but what if we just started with how nature speaks to us? Like, what is the most conventional? No matter where you go, we see this, we feel this, we hear this. The key of seven is maybe the universal language. So in the inner dance process, there will be space and time, the particle and the wave. These have been present in the journey. Even in my field, that garden had been there. And even before I conducted the playlist, I saw this pattern. So it was only a matter of time before there was this awareness that this belongs to the circadian rhythms of our deep story. So yeah, it's interesting that we're moving from these back and forth to these. Enjoy your journey, and see you in the next video.